My name is Matthew Harris, and I am the founder and creator of the Character Be About It program, Troopers Teaching Students. Today, we're going to be talking about data collection from Penn State Core, my third-party evaluation team, in which we've been affiliated with each other over the last several years. Today, we're going to be speaking about the data from the elementary school and from the middle school. This has been the largest sample size of data, report which came out June of 2020. And so I will introduce Dr. Sharice Nixon and Dr. James Hodges from Penn State Core, and they will begin the explanation of the data.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so excited to talk about these data today. So, as you know, the last few years, we've been sort of collecting data along the way, right? And our data set up until sort of this current data set has just been from students that were participating in the character program, right? And we were seeing things like, positive outcomes for conflict resolution, things like increased or improved perceptions towards law enforcement, right? We knew that there were some good things that were happening as a result of participating in the program. What we didn't quite know, what we couldn't say, was that the outcomes were due specifically to the character program or the curriculum, right? Because we didn't have a comparison group to kind of look at. This year we did, right? This was the first year where we have, for both middle school and elementary school students, as Dr. Nixon will talk about, we have a data set that is a pre-post design with both treatment, so students that were receiving the curriculum, the Character Be About It curriculum for middle school, Carrington's Wild Character Adventure for elementary. And then our comparison or our control group would be students that did not receive any of this curriculum. What that allows us to do is say that any changes that we saw in the data pre-post are attributable to this curriculum and maybe not some other confound that was happening sort of in the school. It allows us to have a clean comparison within a research design, right? And so this was the first year where we were really able to do that. And so we were excited to see what the data would tell us, if we saw any similarities from some of the more pilot data that we were collecting in the past. One really quick thing that I'll say before turning it over to Dr. Nixon to actually talk about the data, is that what you will see in the slides, right, are, you notice that I said pre and post for treatment and control. So you would kind of think, okay, I'm going to be looking at 4 different bars or 4 different numbers. You'll actually see 2. And the reason for that, just to kind of set the stage, what you are looking at, the numbers that the charts will represent are post-test scores, accounting for or statistically controlling for scores at time 1 or scores at baseline, right? And so what that allows us to do is just kind of clean up the data a little bit, and it's really representing, again, scores at the post-test that is statistically accounting for scores at the pre-test. So I just kind of wanted to set the ground stage for visually what we will be seeing when we look at the data. So any questions there, Matt?
No, that's fine. Thank you, James.
Okay, perfect. So Dr. Nixon, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hodge. So we're going to take a look at Character Be About It and the middle school data set first. And as we look at this, we're going to remind ourselves that this is a universal character education program. And I think that's important to say because it's not an intervention. This is for all kids, and everybody would benefit, not just what we call at-risk kids. They were delivered in classroom lessons, and some examples of those lessons include things like self-regulation, hope, grit, integrity, and gratitude. The big research question is, what are the effects of Character Be About It on students' behaviors and attitudes? And it's important for us to look at attitudes in large part because attitudes predict behavior. So it's going to be very important as we go through that we look at students' attitudes. We're going to look at students' police perception. Did they like police perception? Did they trust police? And particularly in this climate, this was a really important outcome variable for us to look at. We're going to look at self-control. We're going to look at their self-esteem. And then finally, as we talked, we're going to look at their beliefs, but not just about physical aggression. We're going to look at their beliefs about relational aggression as well, because we know during middle school, relational aggression, that is the prevalence, increases. Exclusion increases, backbiting increases, and the microaggressions that are really subtle, but just as hurtful, increase. So we'll look at those beliefs. Do kids think it's okay to do that? And then finally, we're going to look at students' beliefs about physical aggression. Our data set for the middle school, we had 3 schools. We looked at East, Strong Vincent, and Wilson. And so we had, as Dr. Hodge pointed out, we had students in the control group who received Character Be About It delivered by the troopers, and we had students, or treatment group, and we had students in the control group that did not. And it was very important to us in this rigorous evaluation that we had a comparison group. The methods, as were described, included classroom lessons and were delivered by trained troopers. Part of Matt's program is the training of troopers. In this case, and it becomes important, we were able to look at race. And so in this case, we had troopers, 1 female and 1 male. The surveys, as Dr. Hodge said, were delivered 2 times. They were delivered fall of 2018 and May of 2019. This allowed us to look at any differences in there. According to best practices, what Dr. Hodge was talking about, and this is from the Institute for Educational Sciences, in order to provide the most reliable test we can of effectiveness, we need to control for pre-test differences. And so to do that, what I'm going to describe is the analyses we use called analysis of covariance. And independent variables were simply the condition, those students who received the Character Be About It program or those students who did not, gender, male or female, and then race. For race, for this, it was those students who identified with people of color or those students who identified as Caucasian. So the first question we look at is, how did Character Be About It affect perceptions of police? And this is a big question. This is an important question. We're going to know that higher scores indicated more positive attitudes toward police. Importantly, conditions indicated a condition effect, which meant that those students who received the Character Be About It program actually endorsed better perceptions, more positive perceptions of police than those who did not. And Matt, as we go through, if you have questions, feel free, or need something clarified, feel free to jump in. The second question we looked at is, did Character Be About It affect their self-control? We know that self-control is one of those variables that predict, it's a big variable. It predicts a lot of outcomes for kids. Kids' ability to say no to themselves, particularly in this climate of impulse, is very, very important. What we found with this, higher numbers again represented more self-control. Items included things like, if I feel like it, I'm going to hit somebody. So let's take a look at the data. Results showed a condition by race interaction. In other words, it depended upon students' condition, whether or not they received the program, as well as their race. Follow-up analyses showed that for students of color, their self-control did not change as a result of those who received the character education program. On the other hand, for students who identified as Caucasian, those who participated in the character education program reported higher levels of self-control than their peers. We then took a look at self-esteem and how did the character education program, or in this case, CBAI, affect students' self-esteem. This was a bit more complicated. The results here show that it depended on students' race, gender, and whether or not they received Character Be About It. We measured with 10 items, all validated. Higher numbers represented higher self-esteem. And what we found here was that only female self-esteem changed as a function of Character Be About It and their race. But what's important, as you can see in figure 3, female self-esteem did change as a function of whether or not they participated the program as well as the race, but follow-up analysis showed that there were no what we call main effects of CBAI program. In other words, even though this looks different, the follow-up analysis showed that Character Be About It did not change students' self-esteem. And I think it's important for us to know that the follow-up analysis help us kind of dig in and see where those changes are if they did occur. Finally, the last thing we looked at are children's or students' beliefs. And did Character Be About It change students' beliefs about aggression? And this is a really big question and an important question. Again, because we know beliefs predict behavior. The first one we're going to look at is relational aggression. And relational aggression showed that endorsing relational aggressive behaviors, I'm endorsing it is okay to exclude someone. It is okay to call somebody names. It is okay to verbally harass someone. Those beliefs differed based upon whether or not they received the Character Be About It program and their gender. Let's take a look at the data a little bit closer, and you're going to see that this effect was for females only. What you see here in figure 5 is that there are no effects for males. You can see kind of a straight line here, and that means those males, it didn't matter whether they got the treatment, got the character education program, or the control. Their beliefs about relational aggression didn't change at all. For females, on the other hand, those in the treatment group, they were much less likely to endorse aggressive beliefs about excluding others. The final question we had looked at beliefs about physical aggression, and the items included things like, is it okay to shove someone? Results show that overall, students were more likely to not endorse physically aggressive behavior compared to their peers if they sat in classrooms and participated with the troopers and actually participated in the Character Be About It program. And that's a really exciting finding for us to see. It cut across gender and cut across race as well. And that's just a snapshot of some of the findings. And Dr. Hodge, I'm going to turn it over for you for any kind of clarification or additions you'd like to add.
No, that was good. If you sort of want to get into the elementary data, you know, one thing I'll say as we're looking at maybe this final graph, and this carries over to the other data as well, Matt. When you see the big bars and you see those little skinny lines, right? Those are error bars, and so what you want to see to say something is statistically significant, you don't want overlap between basically those lines. So you want the end of one line to not really overlap with the other. So that basically represents noise or variation, right? That the blue bar is the mean, but for when you look at all the students, some scored higher than the mean, some scored lower than the mean, right? And so sort of what that represents the variation, right? And so what this is telling us is that, yeah, even when you account for students scoring above or below the mean, still when you take that into account, there's a stable difference between the treatment and the control, right?
Understood.
And so that same sort of principle will carry over to the elementary data as well.
And could I just mention something regarding Dr. Sharice Nixon's presentation? Just going back and just recalling what when this data was presented to me, how I felt in regard to what my initial starting of the program was basically solely on one of the variables, Dr. Nixon, was how law enforcement was perceived. All of the other variables, as we grew this over the years and found out that there are going to be multiple variables that are going to encompass this program, that was the exciting part to me, that we are getting a comprehensive approach to behaviors and addressing all these different things in a school setting. And so I'm ecstatic of the data and what we were able to capture in regard to where we started to where we're at now. So thank you for that. And the proof is in the pudding with the data and what it says. So thank you.
Yeah, and Matt, I just want to add too, just so your listeners are aware, in terms of the Character Be About It program, recent research with meta-analyses, that is, they take all these studies together and do averages on what are the best effects. They have found that universal prevention programs are more effective than intervention programs. So you have something here that certainly has potential to grow.
Thank you.
So with that, why don't we close this and then we'll begin the elementary.
Okay.
All right, Matt. So, right. So that concludes the middle school data, right? And so now we will kind of pivot over to the elementary school data, which is using the Carrington curriculum, still the same Trooper sort of setup and implementation. Different variables, some same variables, some variables were the same. We did look at some different variables as well, but sort of the types of analyses that we did. And the way that we will sort of present those data should look very similar to our discussion that we just had with the middle school data. Okay, any questions there?
No, we're good.
Awesome. All right, so Dr. Nixon, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hodge. And so what Dr. Hodge said was important, that because these are little guys developmentally, we can't use the same scales. And so we're going to look at variables that are similar in terms of character education, but these are with 3rd and 4th graders. And this program is going to be different because the content wasn't Character Be About It. It was from Carrington's Wild Character Adventure. And so we're going to talk about that. But the important part from Matt's perspective is that this too was delivered by trained troopers.
Right.
So let's dig in. The research question was simple and it was the same. And it was basically, what are the effects of the character curriculum on children's social emotional development as delivered by trained troopers? And that's important because that is a variable that we wanted to look at. Carrington's Wild Character Intervention, again, was classroom. It was a universal character education program, and it included over 800 3rd and 4th grade students, about half male, half female. And each participating school included both a control group and a treatment group, again, delivered by troopers, over 800 students. The surveys were the same in terms of the timing, if you will. Collected pre-test, September, post-test of that academic year. The difference, though, is the outcomes, as we talked about, are going to be different. Let's take a look at the results. The first result we looked at was friendship, and it was an item included, I treat my friends with kindness. And we wondered, the character program here, Carrington's Wild Character Adventure, delivered by troopers, does it change how kids treat each other in terms of friendship? And what you're going to see in this first figure is a very clean main effect. And what that shows is it doesn't depend on gender, that children's treating of their friends in terms of increasing their friendship skills was better with those who received the Carrington Wild Character Intervention, that's hard to say in one mouthful, with troopers than those peers who did not. And so that's our first finding. That's an important finding. The second outcome we looked at was forgiveness. Again, particularly in this climate, but what we know is that forgiveness is often an understudied variable, and it's a variable that has a lot of positive, it's correlated with a lot of positive attributes. And so an example of a measurement item point that we had is, I admit when I hurt someone. In this, again, we're going to see that those who received the education program delivered by the troopers were more likely to forgive their peers. That, again, is a big deal when you think about the length of time for this program as well. The third outcome we looked at was responsible choices. And again, all of these survey items we used, all the surveys were validated, they're reliable, and they're normed on the specific age group. Here we looked at things like I can make a responsible choice, whatever the case may be. You're going to see patterns as we go through the data. Here again, same pattern. Those who receive the character education program delivered by the troopers were making much more responsible choices than their peers who did not. Gratitude. I say thank you when someone does something nice. That's just an example of an item we used. Again, notice it's almost as if the patterns mirror one another. And so the story seems pretty consistent with the Carrington Character Adventure Program delivered by troopers and its outcomes it was having. In terms of self-esteem, this one came out as a condition by gender effect. And what that means is that for boys, again, not a positive effect. There's no change. For 3rd and 4th grade boys who received this character education program, there was no change. For girls, same thing that we really saw for middle school students, the same trend, if you will. And finally, how did a character education delivered by police officers affect their perception? I trust the police. I like the police. What we found with that, and I'm just going to leave that up for a moment, is that the children receiving the character education program reported more favorable attitudes towards police officers than those children who did not receive the character education program. So it did, in fact, shift and change students' attitudes, even in 3rd and 4th grade, about character education. Any questions for me or clarifications?
And I'd say that's the same story, right? That should sound familiar with the middle school data, as it relates to the perceptions of law enforcement. So different cohorts, different aged youth, same positive outcome.
Right. Matt, anything from you that we could do to clarify or questions?
No, it's just really the data speaks for itself, and the purpose of having Penn State Core and your team evaluate this program has been accomplished to thus far. We want to continue, of course, but to date, what we've done over this period of having the troopers and law enforcement in the classrooms, giving a better perception of law enforcement and giving that positive attitude and that positive reinforcement. That was my initial thought going into this back in 2013. And fast forward to today, it's just exciting to see that what we're doing together is working, and the hope of scaling this, not just here in Erie, but throughout the country, if that's the case, and helping more students see the effect of good character education and what it can do for everyone. That's the end goal. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm excited for the data, and thank you guys once again for being able to present that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome, Matt. I'll end sort of by saying, kudos to you. I think it's one thing to say, my program works because I feel like it's working. It's another thing entirely to say, my program is working because the data are telling me that the program is working, right? And I think this data set, this round of data collection really starts to scratch the surface in a meaningful way to say, look, we are seeing changes, and the type of research design that we were able to employ, again, a pre-post design with treatment and control, we were able to make those clean comparisons to really, with a higher degree of certainty now, say, yes, we are seeing changes, and those changes can be attributed to participation in the program, right? And so, again, it's one thing to say it works because I like it and I feel like it should work. And it's another thing entirely to say it works because I have the data to back it up. And so, kudos to you for pursuing that latter answer to does the program work? And like you said, we sort of look forward to answering more research questions as we move forward in the future, and to get a more fundamental understanding of all the myriad effects that come out from this program. But this is a really
one last thing.
What's that?
Yeah, one last thing, James. I didn't
Yeah.
mean to cut you off. Dr. Nixon, you mentioned the prevention, and that's what going back, and I'll be brief, but going back 2012 and 13, as a law enforcement officer, when I worked 20 years with the Pennsylvania State Police, and I've told you this many times, we're reactionary. We react to majority of our events and situations, whatever that may look like. And that's not normal as you go and interact with youth, waiting till youth become a part of the juvenile justice system, and then you throw multiple programs at them, where why not get ahead of it and have more preventative measures in place so students don't have to be a part of the juvenile justice system and all those different unfortunate variables. So prevention, and you mentioned briefly about prevention, Dr. Nixon. And so I just wanted to just hit on that just briefly. And so prevention is the solution, is what I have on my brochure and a lot of my handouts. And I think that's important as we move forward in 2021 and the volatile society that we're living in.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Good point, Matt.
Agreed. Well said.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you guys for your time, and great presentation.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.